Hi everyone and welcome along to the Coco and Flora podcast. My name is Eva. I'm a knitter, a stitcher, a maker and merchant, and this is a video about everything I have been making in the month of November 2024. So welcome along. How are you? I hope you've had a good month and I hope you're doing okay today. I've got quite a bit to show you today, so I've had to make a list to make sure I don't forget everything. It's a little bit shadowy, so apologies for that. It's a nice clear sunny day, but I'm recording a little bit later in the morning. It's probably getting on for midday now, so the sun is travelling around the corner and the light isn't as even as it usually is. Couple of things I always forget to tell you. First of all, I am recording this in Somerset in the west of England, and the second thing is what I am wearing, because it's a very chilly day, so I've got lots of knitwear on. This is the Ranunculus by Midori Hirose, and I knit it with double knit yarn in the Wonderland Walk colourway, dyed by Ali of the Little Drops of Wonderful podcast and layfamilyyarns.co.uk. And I'm also wearing the Simple Thing, which is a free pattern by Melina Brell, and I got that via Ravelry, and it's again a lovely double knit, straightforward little scarfette pattern, and I knit this from a one-of-a-kind double knit speckled superwash yarn which was dyed by Hedgerow Yarns. I've got a headscarf on because it's so cold and I cut my hair really short yesterday and my hair's freezing. It's still pink and its days are numbered because the bleach is no longer accepting the pink hair dye, so it's time to go back to brown, which is such a shame because I love it pink, and if it just grew pink that would be brilliant, but that's not the way it works. So I think that's everything. Oh, also before I get into the knitting, which I'll start with, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the lovely comments you left on my last video, which in hindsight I quite shamelessly asked for a pep talk really, because I was all in my head about doing this, and I just wanted to say what a huge difference it's made to me. It's a bit like I was doing a scary public speech into a dark room and now the lights have gone on and I'm like, oh, it's just a lovely group of people who are sitting around knitting and drinking tea, and I feel much more relaxed. So thank you for going out of your way to do that. It is greatly appreciated. So with all that being said, let me get into the knitting I've been doing this month. What I should have done for November, as we're getting on to the end of the year, is tie up all the loose ends, finish all the rogue projects and start next year with a clean slate. Instead, I thought, I've got my children's birthdays coming up, Christmas coming up, why don't I start 1,000 new things and make everybody presents? So that's where we're at the moment. So first of all, my youngest celebrated his birthday in the first week of November, and he had asked me for a collection of odd socks. I think I mentioned it last time. So rather than have to keep track of pairs, which is harder for some people than others, he can just wear different colours. I don't have a great deal of tonal yarn, so that was the only thing, but this one is leftover yarn from the colourwork socks that I knit for my daughter, which are now parcelled up in her advent bag. And this is Yarn Smiths, which is a 75% superwash merino, 75% nylon sock weight yarn, which is dyed. It's the own brand of Wool Warehouse, and this is the colourway Crimson, which is number 098. So it's lovely actually, because you can always get 3 socks out of 100 grams with a little bit left over as well. So it's going to be really nice to have a use for all that extra yarn, because I think a pair of socks takes me about 65 grams. So it's lovely to have a use for the leftovers. And then the second one, so that I had a pair to gift straight away, I had to really search deep in my you know, the kind of yarn stash that's buried at the bottom of a wardrobe. I had to go there to get this one because I don't have many tonals, and this is a, excuse my pronunciation, a Shepier's yarn in the Metropolis range, which is a normal sort of 75-25 mix, but the yarn is extra fine superwash merino. So I wasn't sure how it would knit up, but I have to say that I really enjoyed knitting this. It's a really nice plump yarn, and I'm not sure if the camera will pick it up, but it's got these really almost imperceptible little breaks of pink. I don't think they're speckles as much as maybe the yarn dye sort of breaking into tiny little bits. I'll hold it close just in case you can see it. If I didn't say, this is the colourway Buenos Aires, because they're all named after cities, and that is number 067. So I've written myself down a formula for these, which is casting on at the top, 12 rounds of 1x1 twisted rib, 45 rounds for the legs. I think it's 65 for the feet, but that of course all depends on the size shoe of the person. And then I do a wedge toe, and afterwards I put in a heel with the same construction as the wedge toe. When I was laying these out to set up for the podcast, I thought I'd miscounted and done a different amount of rounds for the cuff, but actually they are both 12. But I think this must just be a bit of a plumper yarn. So that is pair of socks number 1. So they've been gifted and then taken back so that I could podcast. Oh, and I should say I knit all my socks 64 stitches and on 2.25mm 9-inch circulars, and then I use the same size double pointed needles to do the decreases on the toes and heels. The next pair of socks that I knit were also a request from my daughter. She asked me, she commissioned me, I think I'm probably just doing it for the love of the job, to knit a pair of socks that she can gift to her girlfriend. So I asked what her favourite colours were, and my daughter said purple and orange, but also a bit of neon wouldn't go amiss. So again, I had to go into my deepest, darkest stash for this, because I love all colour, but I'm not particularly keen on purple. But luckily I had this, which is Knit Picks Hawthorn, which is an 80% superwash Highland wool, 20% nylon. I'm not sure what the colourway of this is. I bought it a really long time ago. It doesn't have a name on it. So I had that purple, and I had this neon, which I bought quite recently, just a couple of months ago, and this is by Rico Design in the Socks Neon range. I don't know the colourway, but I think you'd be hard pressed to miss it if you were looking for a similar yarn. But then I also said I've got this Zobber ball, which has got orange and purple in it. So like mother, like daughter, she said, how about both? Let's have odd socks, one of each. So knit the first one, and I just cast on with the neon, did some 2x2 ribbing and then a couple of sporty stripes, and I used it again for the toe and did the main body of the sock in the purple. It's not as soft as merino because it's Highland wool, but it's quite soft. I think it will be quite comfortable. And then the second one, I just started this. I didn't wind any yarn off. I just started at the beginning of the ball, and I think it's quite nice because it starts with the purple, so that ties them in together a little bit. And it's funny that this one took me probably a week and a half to complete because I wasn't super enthusiastic on working on this sea of purple, but this one I knit it up in a weekend because it's just so fun trying to get to the next colour. It's got some lovely fading, and I was getting a little bit worried as we went into these reds that maybe we wouldn't get to the orange, but then luckily the main bulk of the foot is orange, and then again I didn't wind any off. This is just where it happened to be when I went to add the heel afterwards, and I think that goes really nicely with where we left off with the sort of red. It's like a red that fades into pink really as you get towards the end of the heel. So quite chuffed with those actually. I think they're super fun and they're ready to be given as a present now. And then for the same gal, she was looking at my cocoandflora.com website where I sell my wares, FYI, and she said she would like to commission me to make her something, and I said no worries, I'll make you something for free. So we ended up doing a trade because she's a very talented artist. So I got a couple of her zines and then she chose some fabric from my stash, and this is one of my favourite fabrics. It's Heather Ross and it's just little frogs hanging out by a pond, and I luckily had this lovely apple green linen cotton which I think goes nice with it. I put another bit of Heather Ross frogs in a different design on the pocket, and the reason I'm showing you some sewing in the knitting section is because I thought as I was making this person is animal mad, so I thought wouldn't it be lovely if as my Christmas present to her, when she opened the bag, there was an actual frog inside. So I have knit another little frog using the Dot Pebbles Knits pattern, which is available on Etsy. I put in a little bunch of straw flowers that I grew. I've never grown straw flowers before, but I've used them before in like floristry, so it's lovely to have grown my own. And again, carrying on the animal theme, he's got, or she's got, I think it should be a girl, a little horse button, which is a bit large, but we're going with it. The yarn that I used for the jumper, which again is also a pattern by Dot Pebbles Knits, I don't know what that is, it was just a little scrap of fingering weight yarn. And the yarn that I've used for the frog is Knit Picks Stroll in the pea pod colourway. Again, that's a 75/25 sock weight yarn, and on her little tummy I've used some Drops Nord in it's like a silvery grey colourway, and throughout I've held a mohair which is also Drops. It's Kid Silk Haze, is that what they call it, or is that a brand name? Drops Kid Silk in the apple green colourway. And I use these little they fasten with a sort of a washer, and it recommends in the pattern stockists for these. And I also use floristry wire inside so that the limbs are posable. I do knit these on a much smaller needle than the pattern recommends. I knit them on a 2.25mm needle because I just like them to be this size. So that's a cute little frog. And I always mean to mention, every time I mention frogs, I'm sure everybody's heard of her, but just in case there's anyone out there who hasn't witnessed the delights of the creator India Rose Crawford, I would really encourage you to go and look her up. She puts out the most beautiful animations of her frog and toad. I think you'll find her on Instagram and on YouTube. I watch her on TikTok, but if you haven't seen any of her videos, they're so beautiful, and it's what inspired me to start making frogs and making my little frogs Coco and Flora and everything. So I'm sure you've heard of her, but if there's anyone who hasn't, do go and check her out because they're just works of art. Carrying on with the gift theme, but moving on to crochet, a friend of my youngest's, we bought him for his 18th birthday a really scrungly little jelly cat soft toy. and I knit it a little burgundy scarf. So for Christmas I've knit the adult size so they can be matching. I've not knit it, I've crocheted it. I'm going to say that a lot, forgive me. I do mean crochet, and when I say cast on I mean chained. So I didn't use a pattern for this, and I used Hayfield Bonus Aran, which is a 80% acrylic, 20% wool, and so I thought that would be good for a teen because it hopefully is cosy but will be quite easy care. They come in giant 400-gram balls, and I have quite a bit of that because when I was a new knitter I optimistically thought I would be knitting my whole family Weasley Christmas jumpers. It never happened. Nobody wants them anymore, and so I've got this yarn. I'll probably give some of it away, I think, but I was glad to have this because it was a very similar colour to the little scarf I knit for the I did knit the toy one, but I crocheted this one. So I do not really know the names of the stitches because the terminology confuses me, but whatever the one below a granny stitch is, this is what I used. So I yarn over, put my hook through the stitch, collect some yarn, pull it through, and then yarn over and pull it through all of them. So whatever that is, I don't know if that's half double crochet, not sure, but I chained 30. I think it did go in a little bit, as you can see at the bottom there, so I don't think it is 30 all the way up, but that's given me a width of about 8 inches, and the whole scarf is 6 foot long, and I used 198 grams of the 400-gram ball for that. So I'll just pop it on so you can see how it is. I think it's long enough without being too long to sort of have to carry around all day or whatever, and it makes a really nice plump cozy warm scarf. So yeah, I don't think there's much else to say about that. Oh, I used a 5.5mm crochet hook, and yeah, pretty much just made it up, and it was very, very fast. I think that's the beauty of a chunky yarn. It's an Aran weight yarn actually, and crochet stitches is that it took me a few hours really. I worked on it over maybe 3 different sessions of an hour and a half to 2 hours each time, and it was done. I actually had a concentrated week of doing a lot of that, and I did a vlog on my Patreon, and that was really useful because it cleared some of the things off my mental list so that I felt a little bit more on top of all of these projects that I'd started, and then I was free to return to my ghosty socks. So I think that when I last spoke to you I had knit down to the toe here, and then I was waiting because I was doing a bit of yarn management and I hadn't put the heel in yet. So these are part of the Colourwork Cuff Club, which is a year-long, I think, pattern release of various charts of colour work which you can put onto the pattern that comes with the club, or just put them onto your own formula, which is what I do. And one of October's charts was these ghosties. So I am knitting this with, I started with Drops Nord in the light beige mix colourway. I think I've written down the numbers here just in case you wanted to know. That's 07. The Sweet Orchid, which is the main colourway, is number 25, and the off-white, which I used for the ghosts, is 01. I forgot to tell you last time that the yarn that I used for the faces is just a random fingering weight scrap, but it was very dark purple, which I thought would go nicely with the orchid, but it was variegated, which I don't think has helped me in the neatness stakes. I was saying last time that my faces are a little bit weird and wild. I'm quite new at colourwork, and especially colourwork socks. So my second sock, the story was I was going to go and hang out with my daughter. I knew we would just be staying in her house because it was just like an afternoon visit after everybody's college days, and I didn't have any vanilla knitting to take with me, but I thought it would be a great chance to get some done. So for the second one, I just wanted to really quickly get the chart done. I had about an hour, and I think it's turned out much neater than the first one, even though I was sort of rushing. Maybe I wasn't overthinking it so much. And then I was looking around because all I wanted to take was, didn't want to have to bring charts or anything. I just wanted to take the ball of yarn and the sock and just knit. So then I was looking around for the world's tiniest project bag just to chuck in my handbag, and I had made this for my shop the day before, but for some reason I think I must have just mismeasured the boxing because it just wasn't sitting as neatly as I wanted it to, so I kept it for myself. So this project was in the world's tiniest project bag, and I've got the leftovers in here. So that's the variegated yarn. As you can see, it's got quite a lot of bits of brown and things, so I think a solid colour would have been better for the eyes and mouth. And then that's all I've got left of the Sweet Orchid, 2 grams. So I was saying to you last time that I was hoping to get the heels at least out of the orchid so that it wasn't broken up, because I just really love the colour, but I didn't even have enough for 1 heel, let alone 2, so the beige has had to go in for all of the heels and toes, which wouldn't be my first choice, but it's just a pair of socks, it's not that serious, is it? So, but it did get me thinking, and I'd love to know, you don't have to comment on this episode, but if you like commenting, I'd really love to know. I enjoyed these so much because I just love looking at this colour while I'm knitting, and that for me I think is my primary motivation, not just for knitting but for all the sewing and most of the creative stuff that I do. I just love colour, and I love looking at colour and pattern and stripes and speckles and combinations. But I notice watching other podcasters that that's not always the case. I think I notice a lot of podcasters who really take so much delight in innovative knitting techniques and design features and novel things to try with their knitting and mastering complicated stitches. Other people, I think, really like the relaxation of repetitive, easy projects, which I also like, but I think that my number one motivator is just looking at beautiful things. So if you do feel like commenting, I'd be really interested to know, do you feel there is a main reason that you enjoy knitting, and if so, what is it? I guess for some people it's the finished product, which is also a massive motivator, but not always the thing that is the top thing, so yeah, I'd be really interested to know your thoughts on that one. And that completes my ghosty socks. I won't be casting on another pair from the Colourwork Club just at the moment because I think it's going to be a busy December, but yeah, I'm really enjoying the club, which I hope I said is by Summerlee Designs. Then the other thing that I'm going to be working on throughout December, because I did not get it finished for my youngest's birthday, is the Flax Sweater by Tin Can Knits. I showed you this, I think, in the last video. I've got 2 of them now because I said to you that this neckline looked a little bit wide, but I was sure it would be fine. Well, it was not fine, and I had to start again, which is why I haven't made so much progress with it. And when I looked to start again, I saw that there was an option in the pattern, thank goodness, where you could just go straight into the neck and body and go back later and add the ribbing, which I think will be a lot better for me so that I can get the neckline right. I went down half a needle size. I think this is maybe a 4.5mm, I can't quite remember, but I went down a needle size and I removed 10 stitches, and then I just did an extra increase round to get back up to the numbers that I needed. It still looks really wide, so I'm very much hoping that I can pick up less stitches and tinker around with it to get a neckline that kind of is fairly tight. So I have got almost, yeah, I think probably to about the same stage as the first one was, where I've just got a couple of more raglan increases to do, and then I'll be about ready to split for the sleeves. I'm knitting this out of Drops Alaska in the dark ivy colourway. That's an Aran weight 100% wool, and what's the number? That's number 74. Most of these yarns that I'm telling you about I got from Wool Warehouse, by the way. So yeah, there's not a lot to say about that. I'm knitting the size small, and I'm knitting on the recommended needles, which I think is a 5mm for the main body, and I'm hoping to get that done now as a Christmas present. There's a ball of the yarn. It's 50-gram balls, and I think I've got 10 of them, I think. So that's everything I've finished and am working on, but continuing the knitting theme, I dyed a bit of yarn. So I dyed this. I got for my birthday, I'm not sure whether I mentioned it to you or not, but I got a set of Jacquard acid dyes for yarn dyeing in the neon colourways. I think there's 6 different colours, and I fancy dyeing some really bright speckly yarn because I would like to knit a pattern which came out last year as part of Helen Stewart or Curious Handmaid's knit vent patterns, and it's called the Gingerbread House socks. And it's a DK weight pair of socks, but I didn't have the right yarns for it. So I bought at some point this year some more of the Yarn Smiths. I think I bought a few colours together when I needed it for various gifts, and I put in for myself this cinnamon colourway, which is shade 122, and again it's 75-25 superwash merino nylon, Wool Warehouse's brand. It's 100 grams, and I also bought at the same time a couple of the sort of off-white or cream ones with a view to using them for dyeing. So they come in this sort of roll scenario, so I had to skein it up and I dyed this. I didn't use all of the colours. I think I used the red, the pink, the yellow and the orange. And the first one that I dyed, I really like it, but it spread a little bit more than I wanted because I forgot the point at which I was going to add some more vinegar to make the speckles strike a bit more crisply. And so I then found a hank of Knit Picks Felici in the Bear colourway, and I did it again. So exactly the same colour. So I'm just see if I can move my light because it's sort of blowing it out a little bit. And this, they look very, very similar, but this does have crisper speckles. So this was the one that I caked up because what I originally intended to do was perhaps micro stripe or chunky stripe these together. But I've changed my mind actually, because on the leg of that sock pattern there's like a little bit of lace work that makes a gingerbread house, and so I think it would be better to use the cinnamon as the main body of the sock and just use my speckles for the heels, toes and cuffs, so that will look like the icing and the sprinkles. That's my reasoning for dyeing this, is that I want this to look like the decoration of the gingerbread house. So yes, I caked that one up, and then I did a little swatch because it was a bit more speckly than I was intending really. So this is it held double, because that, I think I mentioned that pattern is for a double knit weight sock. So that's 2 strands of the same thing held together. But then I did it where I held 1 strand of my dyed yarn with the Bear yarn, and I think that's the one that I'm going to go for for the sock. I think it probably is slightly nicer and more reminiscent of icing, though I do like this one. But another good reason to do it this way with the bare yarn is that I'll have more of this left over, because I think if I alternate skeins with my two dyed yarns, just to kind of account for the different dye results, I could knit something like the mini mock neck top by Jessie Made Designs, because I really like things like that in hand dyed yarn, but I very rarely got two of the same hand dyed yarn, because I'm a person who will just occasionally treat myself to a hand dyed skein, but I don't tend to buy like sweater quantities or anything. So to have more than 100 grams of something would be really lovely, and yeah, that's my kind of long-term plan at some point in the future, is to knit that using these, because I'm thinking probably use about 30 grams tops of this if I'm holding it with this for the heels, toes and cuffs. So I should have about 170 grams to knit a top out of, and if I'm lucky, even a little bit of leftovers from that to add into my garter stitch blanket, or maybe just some more contrasts for a sock. So I'm really chuffed with the way they turned out. It's never exactly what I'm going for, because I'm just an experimental dyer who doesn't really know what she's doing, but I knit them up with the cinnamon so I could see how they look together, and I knit fairly generous swatches because I thought I can always use these for my frogs. They could benefit from some little rugs or some cosy blankets. And I think that kind of leads me into briefly saying what my plans are for December. I'd love to get these done, and being DK weight, they should be fairly quick. It's sort of top priority to get the flax knit. I haven't brought my Corin cardigan to show you this time because I've done a little bit of work on it, but it's just more of the same. It's a bottom up all over lace cardigan by Rebecca Clow of the Creya Bayer, and so I'm just knitting the same part of the body length at the moment. So if I can get to that at some point during December, I would like to, but that's on the bottom of the list. And I'd like to do these more. I'd like to get the flax done, and then I've got one other plan for December, and I did treat myself to some yarn. Eva, says I to myself, it's about time you had yet another skein of pink speckly yarn. I bought this very beautiful DK yarn from Indie Yarn Club. I have the ball band here. Indie Yarn Club cleverly ships this sort of unskeined so that it will fit in a smaller envelope to keep shipping costs down, and then they provide you with the ball band should you wish to skein it up and put it together yourself. But I thought that was just perfect bookmark kind of thing, so I didn't I did skein it up, but I didn't put the band on. So it's got lovely peaches and pinks, bits of gingery yarn, little bits of black, and I think that actually future me gave me the nudge to buy this, because serendipitously within about 24 hours of me ordering this, I have bought the knit vent patterns again this year by Curious Handmade, and the pattern that came within a day of me ordering this is the Noel scarf, which is a DK scarf. It's very similar to this or the Sophie scarf by Petite Knits, but it's got a lovely little panel of lace work in the middle. Quite simple lace by the looks of it, so I think my future self knew that I would be needing a beautiful yarn to knit that up. So I'm really looking forward to working on that just as a little side project for myself. So I've got something lovely to do during December, and I think the colours in that are so lovely. This is a 100% superwash merino, so it feels lovely. Oh, and if I didn't say, it's called Roisin, and it's 100 grams, 250 meters. So that's my knitting, my crochet, my plans. I've just got a very brief sewing section for you, and then at the end I will talk about my business, Coco and Flora, and all that sort of thing. I've got some new products to go in my shop. The one thing that I've done with sewing this month is I've made my eldest a pair of pyjama trousers, and I've made it in this lovely ghosty fabric. I'll put in a little bit of cutaway footage because it's really difficult to show this in this tiny rectangle, but it's just a very simple pair of elasticated waist, 100% cotton fabric PJ trousers with these lovely ghosty guys. I got this fabric from Textile Express. I think it was called Gentle Ghost, but it was a few years ago, so I'm not sure whether it would still be available. And I used the Margot PJ trousers, which is a pattern in the Tilly and the Buttons book, Love at First Stitch. Here's the book. Here's the Margot pyjamas. Here's a good look at the ones I made. And side note, guys, my advent yarn from Indie Yarn Club has arrived. So exciting. And I just adapt it. That's a drawstring closure at the top, but I just adapt it to make a channel to put elastic in. So that's another gift that I got done this month. And then the other thing that I've sewn this month is something for my hallway. We've been working hard over the last several weeks and longer really to do up our hall. We've sanded and oiled the floor, and then I've done miles and miles of painting, done the whole thing, woodwork and walls a nice spring green, and it's just about ready, which I'm super relieved about because it means we've got one finished space. So it's finally worth decorating for Christmas. The last 2 years since we've lived in this house, I was so burnt out after the move the first year, I couldn't find it in my heart to decorate. The next year, everything was still very chaotic and it didn't seem worth it. So I'm really looking forward to having a twinkly light, festive, jolly December. And the hall is the one space that is not chaotic and I can decorate. So I decided to celebrate that by making a little mini quilt. And here it is. This is using the Moda fabric range. It's called, I've completely forgotten, I'll have to refer to my notes, hang on. Take 2, it's Swell Christmas by Urban Chicks for Moda. Again, this is not a recent fabric range. I've had this for quite a while. It's a little bit busier than I think it should be because I didn't really have any low volume fabrics in this range apart from the holly one. But I think I've used it too sparingly to have an impact on calming things down. And I did a sawtooth block or a star block, but within that I made this one a square surrounded by other squares, and then to make it a little bit bigger I did some more 2-inch squares around the edge. So I put the Santa fabric on the back because I don't know why, I didn't really want him in my quilt, and so I've put some loops on the back and I'm going to thread a dowel through there so that it can hang on the wall in my hall. Opposite the front door there's quite a big expanse of wall, and what I'd really like to do is have that as a wall for sort of handmade art. So I'd like to have a quilt up there, and I'd really like to make different ones perhaps for the seasons as time goes by so that they're interchangeable throughout the year. And then both my children are artists, so I'd love to have some of their work and their prints up. As I say, I've got a couple of zines from my daughter's girlfriend and they're all quite into making zines, and I'd really like to put up a little shelf where they could sit and you could take them down and have a look at them. I'd love to have a go at making a zine myself. Actually, I'm going to I'm going to make my children sit down and teach me how to do it. That'll be nice for them. So yeah, I'd love to have a creative wall. I've got cross stitches I'd like to do and hang up there, that sort of thing. So yeah, and it was nice to use this up. I have always wanted to make a quilt out of this, but I have, you'll be unsurprised to learn, a long list of quilts I'd like to make, and I didn't want to add another one to the list. So I'm really glad to have used some of this, but done it in a quick way that is now done and dusted, and it's got it out of my system, but the quilt is made. So mini quilts could be the way forwards, I think. So that's all of my personal making, if you will. So now for the last part of the podcast, I'm going to talk about my business, cocoandflora.com, and my Patreon, which I'm also Coco and Flora on Patreon. I wanted to say something about Patreon, which I meant to say last month, because as of November, Apple, if you join anybody's Patreon through the Apple Patreon app, Apple are now charging an additional 30% as their payment processing fee. So I won't say too much about that, other than you may prefer to just go directly to the Patreon website if you're an Apple user and you want to join somebody's Patreon. It doesn't affect you if you're already a member of a Patreon. Your monthly charges won't go up, but initially when you're joining something, you may prefer to go directly to the Patreon website. But for Patreon, I did a blog at the start of this month, which is absolutely free to read if you just want to go over and join my Patreon. I think you just enter your email and then you have access to my blogs. But I spent quite a lot of time creating a little setup for my frogs, who are Coco and Flora, who look a lot like that other frog I showed you earlier. And I just did it out of a cardboard box, and as I was dismantling it, I kind of thought it's really a shame to go to all that work just to take a picture. And so I went to my favourite printers. This is where I get my business packaging from. It's from moo.com. Yeah, moo.com. I was just looking for some branding for them, but I can't find any. And I got some postcards printed of the pictures that I took. So I hope by the time this podcast is published, I'm going to have added them to my shop, just in case you want any cute pictures of frogs on postcards. So here's the first one. This is Coco making some crumpets. And here are Coco and Flora toasting their crumpets, because my blog post was about how they spent their rainy day. Oh, actually, I think that was the only two I've got. Editing Eva here, there is a third one, and it's the knitting and reading scene. I'm hoping to expand that as time goes by. So if you did want any postcards of Coco and Flora, they will be in my shop. And then I've got a few bits that I've made for my shop to show you. I wanted to do, and I've actually somehow only ended up with one of them. I wanted to do some bags and things out of that swell Christmas fabric. So I've made a little notions pouch with the retro deer in the middle and some quilted pieces of the other fabrics, and then with the lovely plaid on the back. And I've got the poinsettia inside for the lining. But then I moved on to another retro deer, a little ruby and star deer with some quilted pieces and more deers on the back. So these are all my little notions pouches, some peach stripes inside that one. Then I dug out some of my lovely kawaii fabric for this lovely bear and snowman and bunnies, etc. And that's got a lovely little cat and mouse with stars fabric inside. So very much a cute creatures pouch, that one. And then I did a couple of winter scene pouches. This one is sort of quite iridescent with the snowflakes. They're like quite shiny. And then just the plain snowflakes inside, and the insides are quilted. If it's quilted on the outside, it's not quilted on the inside, but if it's not quilted on the outside, it's quilted on the inside. And then I've got a little ski village one with the cable cars and the little chalets, and that's got some Liberty Wiltshire in a sort of metallic silver inside. So a few pouches. I made a few more bookmarks, and I must apologise that I never published my how to make these video, which I was going to do on my free Patreon channel, because I lost the video. I was having trouble with iMovie, which is what I use to edit these videos. It wouldn't export my videos. I would spend hours editing them and it would say can't export, no space. And in the end, the only way I could resolve it was by deleting and re-downloading the app. And all of the advice online was, don't worry, your projects will still be there when you re-download the app. They were not, so I lost that video, so apologies for that, but perhaps I can remake it in the new year. So I always put Liberty on the back, and again that's the Swell Christmas range, and that's just various wintry fabrics. And then I used those same collection of various wintry fabrics to make some project bags. I'll show you this one first because I think these go in order of how festive you want to feel. So this is a very classic crisp colours. I just find that I have a lot of these lovely sages and pale greens and grey greens. So I've paired those with a really sharp, nice, natural linen cotton blend and a sort of sage, I guess we would say, a sage lining inside, and the same for the fabric drawstrings. Then if you want to go just slightly glitzier, it's a very similar colour palette but with a few more pops of red, and then this linen has got silver threads in it. So if you wanted that to catch the light of your fairy lights or your tree lights, that would be a little bit more glittery. And then if you want to go full on warm, festive, celebratory December Christmassy vibes, I've got this one. So this one has got gold metallic threading and a more random selection of patches, but I think with an overall pinky red vibe. And inside that one is plain pink and some mittens on the pocket. So yeah, some small project bags and some little notions pouches and a few bookmarks in the shop, and also some postcards as well. So I think that's pretty much everything. I'm going to go and lie down in a dark room for several days now after all that making, and I hope to catch up with you in December. Stick around for some rare footage of November if you would like to, and thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now. Oh, and also don't forget to have so much fun with whatever you're making. Bye.